focusing on management practices during challenging times. So to that end, we've identified 3 areas that we thought we could do some short presentations and then open it up for questions. So we're going to, this morning we're going to be talking about CAS. Dr. Jerry Bertoldo will be here to do that. We're going to talk about some labor efficiency, and Jason Karsis will pick up the presentation for that. And we're going to start out with some ration options. And our speaker for the first session here is Dr. Tom Overton, who's, of course, I think, I'm preaching to the choir, you all already know this, but he's with the faculty of Cornell, does a tremendous amount of research in the whole nutrition area, director of Codary and cooperative extension, does a lot of work in this whole area. So he said he was willing to come out here today and give us some sort of low cost, no cost options for ration work to help in these kinds of challenging times. So with that, Dr. Overton. Folks, if you don't have the handout, please let me know and I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, all right. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Hey, another day at Empire Farm Days, right? Got a little rain going on out there, but it's going to let up for a little bit anyway. And actually, hopefully, we're in good shape for the rest of the day. So, thanks for coming out, and thanks to Kathy for organizing all this, and also to Dairy Business Communications for the continued partnership here at the Empire Farm Days. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little about ration opportunities, sort of some of the keep your eye on the ball type stuff relative to, again, how do we do better in maximizing our feeding programs and things like that. I think we all recognize that feed and crop expenses account for probably the single largest cost of making milk, right? Part of operating costs. I think Jason's summary from Dairy Farm Business Summary last year is about 39 or 40% feed and crop expenses out of total cost of making milk, and so it is a big kahuna there within that, and so obviously it's attractive to try to let's make sure we're maximizing that out there. Okay, so you guys have a paper that actually captures essentially a lot of the detail of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to kind of hit this in fairly quick hit fashion though with you this morning. As long as the remote cooperates.
Is it on?
I think so. No. I guess it would help to turn it on. All right. All right, so we're really going to talk about 5 things, right? And hopefully, I know a number of you are doing this already, but certainly opportunities to do this even more. I think first here is know and track your income over feed cost and income over purchase feed cost, okay? And again, we're going to more detail on these things. 2, let's make sure we're optimizing use of homegrown feeds and forages, right? Now I say optimize, right, in that context. Optimize and maximize may be 2 different things. Now in general, when we have our forage quality here in the Northeast, we think that higher forage diets make a lot of sense and really help us here, right? But we have had some forage quality challenges, and so we need to think about that. Fine-tune your feeding management. Okay, strategically review rations, and I think the key word on that is strategic. Okay, certainly we've had a little bit of play out there in the industry of folks suggesting that we should cut costs at all costs, right? And I think we can do better than that. And so I'm going to walk you through some thoughts there relative to how that might be approached. And then the last part is carefully review cow and heifer inventories and needs. Okay, and again, I'm going to hit each of these in a little bit of detail. Okay, so talk first about income over feed cost. Again, as we talked earlier, the single biggest component in terms of cost of making milk. Simply, we're talking there about net milk revenue minus the feed cost, either expressed on a total or purchase basis. One of the reasons we like it is that it accounts for about 50% of the variability in return on assets. So about 50% of the profitability is tied or related to this metric, which of course means 50% of the profitability of the dairy farm is related to what? Everything else, right? So there's lots of other factors that come into play. So it's not the thing, right? But I think it's one that certainly is worth paying attention to. Okay. Certainly can be calculated and tracked using spreadsheets or tools. Some of you may participate in the Cornell Dairy Profit Monitor Program. It's a monthly tool where it will help you calculate this both on a actual milk price basis, also a fixed milk price basis that may give you a little better sense of how your management is improving, because obviously milk price has a huge impact on what this number is at the end of the day. Penn State also has an app that I was able to find. So they have it's called Dairy Sense Pro, and it's available on both Apple and Google formats. And it has both producer and consultant versions. So the producer version would just be a single farm. I think it's $10 to the app. The consultant version would allow a consultant to input multiple farms within that. And again, it certainly would have to have producer permission to do that. And they got mechanisms to do that. I think that's $15 or something like that. But so there are some app-based ways to do that. And of course, you can also do it with just spreadsheets or even on paper, right? I mean, you don't need to have a fancy tool to do that, but sometimes the tools help you do that more efficiently. I'll say it's most useful for within farm comparisons. I would say unless we're standardizing costs for things like homegrown feeds and our homegrown feeds, right? Because those, the prices that you put on homegrown forages can vary widely, and depending on what you're accounting for within that, right? So that can be done in different ways. One of the things that, there's too much information on here, I've summarized it in the first page of your handout. One of the things that Jason, and who's my twin brother, by the way, in case you didn't know that, Jason, as part of the Business Focused Discussion Group program, has done, of course, those are groups of 10 to 12 farms typically that get together twice a year, compare full financials, et cetera, et cetera. But then they also do projects, and one of the things we've done a couple different times now has been to drill in on income over fee cost and some of the things that kind of relate to that. Okay. What's interesting to me, I've got some data here. I'll cover the themes with you. Is both times we've done it, and again, the dairies that are participating in these groups are good dairies, right? From my perspective, they're all good dairies. But the range from high to low, both times we've done it, is $3 per cow per day income over feed costs, and that's an amazing number to me because think about that for a minute. So for 100 cows, right, you're at $3 per cow per day difference, right? High to low, $300 a day times a year, right? You're looking at $110K per 100 cows, potential range and difference there. And it's phenomenal to me how large that difference is and can be out there, okay? And what it means relative to the bottom line. So what are some of the themes here on this slide? We've got kind of basically in one of the groups, we had essentially the top 4 herds in the discussion group. We had the bottom 3 on the bottom. Well, what separates those herds? If you look at, and again, it is in the first page of your handout, kind of bottom line here is that herds that are high in income over feed cost, okay, they're making milk, they're making components. Okay, and actually that accounts for about 50% of the variation in income over feed cost anyway, is simply how much components are going out the door. Okay, and so if you look here, if you were able to see, which I'm sure you can't, okay, they're all over 6 pounds of components. Okay, fat and protein shipped per cow per day. Second part that differentiates, higher feed efficiency. Of course, higher production promotes higher feed efficiency, but also they're getting higher feed efficiency, and they're running around, basically upper 1.6s to 1.7. Okay, that's roughly what those herds are running. Whereas the herds that have lower income or feed costs, they're down more around 1.6, upper 1.5s to 1.6. Now that from a nutritious perspective, I mean, if you're running 1.6 pounds of milk per pound of dry matter, that's not bad feed efficiency, right? But clearly the herds that are really doing well in income or feed costs are a notch above, okay? Higher cost per cow per day, right? So if you look at things like cost per cow per day, the high margin herds are spending more per cow per day, but again, they're making more milk, they're eating more feed, okay, right? So that number is going to go somewhat hand in hand. Not enough herds are to look at this one, but in general, lower stocking density. Okay, we do see at times, with herds overstocked, we see some hits sometimes in feed efficiency on those herds. They generally have lower stocking density. Higher forage NDF intake, percent of body weight. I'll talk about that metric here in a minute. But basically, those herds are feeding generally more forage. And that probably comes back to when we've drilled in it, it means actually, in most of these cases, they've got higher quality forage, which enables them to really feed it. Right? So it still comes back to that part of the program from a management standpoint. Similar component percentages, right? So similar fat and protein percentages anyway in milk between the two groups. But again, clearly the herds on top are making more milk. And then actually slightly higher cost per pound of dry matter of the diet for the herds of high margin. Okay, so again, these herds are not, feeding necessarily cheaper diets, right? From a cost per pound of dry matter standpoint, they're probably not feeding it, or feeding maybe higher value ingredients, things like that. Okay, so again, just some things that look to be a little bit different between high and low margin herds. All right, so let's make sure we're optimizing the use of homegrown forages and feeds. And so that really rewards those of you, and I know a bunch of you in the room do, really focus on having high forage quality, right? And so that rewards you for that. A couple different ways you can kind of just kind of back of the napkin, kind of benchmark some of these things, etc. You can calculate for one of the ways it's sort of time tested and true is to look actually at forage NDF intake as a percentage of body weight. Okay, and again, that sounds like a mouthful. But essentially, that drills at maturity harvest, rewards herds that do a better job getting lower fiber anyway, say in haylages, things like that, at harvest. So again, they can feed more of that material. Milking cows typically can consume around 1% of their body weight as NDF coming from forage sources. Okay, and so, just as a quick example on that, a 1,500 pound cow times 1% gives 15 pounds of NDF from forage. If those forages are average 50% NDF, and then do simple math here, you got to be able to feed 30 pounds of forage dry matter to those cows, right? Somewhere in that range, okay, give or take. So it's not a bad little spot check anyway, relative to where am I at in these diets relative to the cows, okay? We do have some newer techniques out there that the forage labs have, which actually look at, can actually give us an index of truly undigestible NDF. And some work out of Minor Institute would suggest that cows can eat 0.3 to 0.35% of their body weight as that. So our nutritionists are starting to look at some of these other parameters. We've got some more modern ways, I'll say, to look at some of these things, and I think ways we can dial in. Okay. One of the things that was really interesting, and I think some of you, my hunch is that some of you experienced this, is certainly 2017 corn silage was certainly lower digestibility than 2016 corn silage, right? Now, I'm cautiously optimistic, given our droughtiness earlier in the growing season here, that 2018 corn silage is probably going to have higher digestibility associated with it. So we'll see what happens here. We got a bunch of the growing season left to go, but I'm optimistic that we may see some better corn silage out there this year than we had last year. But one of the things that we were running into a little bit is not only were we having lower digestibility in general of 2017 corn silage, but it was particularly a lot higher in this undigestible fiber fraction, almost disproportionately so. And so it really explained why at some farms really took some hits in terms of milk, 4 to 7 pounds of milk anyway, on some dairies relative to lower milk yield they got on 2017 corn. Okay, so again, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be better. Of course, we always want to feed the highest quality and digestibility forages to our transition or lactation cows. Okay, we have a choice to do that. All right, fine-tune the feeding management. And this is another area where I think when we're not doing our silage management, bunk or bag or whatever other form you're doing, feeding management, when you don't have that dialed in, those losses often are quote-unquote invisible to us, right? Those are what I'll say, the invisible losses on the farm. Are we taking enough off the face? You see at least 6 inches, preferably 12 inches per day. Keep the faces tight, minimal leftover feed. Maintenance of mixers, grinders, and things you're using to feed cows, that can drift, right? That drifts. Those are often relatively lower cost things to do, but maintenance sometimes drifts away. And so are we really maintaining those things for optimal performance? Do we know what our feeding accuracy is? Are we tracking shrink? Do we know what we're losing there? Do we have fresh feed available when cows are milking? Again, you see some numbers there on refusal rates. I prefer to see a little bit higher refusal rate for close-up and fresh cows, knowing we potentially refeed that material elsewhere. Same thing on high cows, knowing we potentially refeed that material elsewhere as well. Okay, ideally to later lactation cows in that case. And then the last thing I'll say here is I would say resist temptation to ditch the inoculants and preservatives. Okay, it's an area that can be attractive. One of the things when we have poor silage fermentation, one of the areas that tends to hit us in more than anything else probably is butterfat. right? And that actually is what's, from the standpoint of what's really important to make sure we're maximizing out there these days is the butterfat component anyway. So when things are off, especially on things like snap, which high moisture corn, so those of you who may have a big corn crop this year, again, fingers crossed for a big corn crop, you may have some of that to work with, and let's make sure that we're preserving that well so that you don't get bitten by that later in terms of component yield. All right, strategically review rations, okay, and I think this is always an area we should always be doing, right, whether times are good or times are challenging, and understanding what's going in the diet, why it's going in the diet, okay, can we connect the dots there, what research is available to back response, okay, how reliable do we think our responses are going to be, what do the economics look like, anyway, etc. And I know that can be a challenging area to sort through, and I strongly encourage you to do that in conjunction with your nutritionist, but it's something that certainly should always be done. And so again, it comes back to optimizing our forage and homegrown feed use. It comes back to adjusting for fiber digestibility. Of course, with lower digestibility forages, sometimes bring in some byproduct feeds like soy hulls, citrus, other things like that to help boost digestibility. One of the areas I think we miss on sometimes out there, and there's some newer assays that the labs have that will help us do that, is to evaluate our protein sources for digestibility, or rather undigestibility. Okay, so generally speaking, our soys, our canolas are pretty good from a digestible standpoint, maybe the bypass versions of those. Distillers can have wide variability and that's one of the things that sometimes folks bring into diets to try to cheapen them up, right? But distillers, the undigestible protein fraction can range anywhere from about 5% up to 50%. So you get up to half of that protein might actually not even be available to the cow, right? So again, you may have saved money on cost per ton, but again, so it's good to ask those questions relative to feed suppliers and things like that. How digestible are the protein sources in here? Okay, and have you evaluated that? Some of the animal protein sources can also have some issues there as well. So potentially there are opportunities out there. We learned this we learned a lot about this in 2009, right? So then we remember that fun time in the industry. We can sometimes, as we learn more, as we tighten things down, we can lower some of our protein feeding rates though, and save some costs there. I want to again remind you to prioritize though maintaining ingredients, whether it's feed, nutrient sources, or additives that really directly affect daily cash flow, right? Because I think that's key, obviously, in everything here. The second part is prioritizing them, things that you're going to feed during very targeted parts of the lactation cycle, right? So transition cows, fresh cows, things like that, things that will boost their performance, and then you take advantage of that for the rest of the lactation cycle. And then Bertoldo's going to bang on this in some detail with you, but I would say resist temptation to cut the calf nutrition side of what you're doing, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of calf disease issues, drug costs, treatment costs, whatever, to more than offset any savings in going for a cheaper, say, replacer or other thing relative to calf programs and things like that. Okay, so I would encourage you to resist that temptation. And then I think finally, and Jason's got a lot of resources that he's put together on pieces like this, but are the right cows being milked, and how many heifers do you need, right? And I think that's always an area. Certainly a lot of herds have improved their reproduction, in the last few years. It means more animals, more heifers coming up, and do we, depending on what the objectives of the dairy are, do we really need to raise all of them, right? And I think it's always worth having that discussion at the farm level. And the answer is probably going to be different for each farm, right? It depends on the farm objectives and things like that. We do know that overstocking, on the lactating side, does contribute to lower feed efficiency. Okay, so there are some impacts there. There are some balance points. So again, you're milking cows. Maybe they'd be better off going down the road and compromising performance of the whole. Again, it's always a tricky balance point at the farm level. And I think every farm is a bit different in terms of how you actualize that. And then again, Jason's put together a bunch of resources at the ProDairy website on just cost of replacements, on spreadsheet tools relative to how many, how many replacements you need, and other things like that as well. So he's done a nice job with that. Okay. So with that, thank you for your attention, and be happy to take questions as Jason comes up here to make a transition. Yeah, Garrett.
When looking at income over fee costs, should you use a fixed milk price or should you use an actual? Look at both. And if you're using fixed, what do you use and how do you correct for solids?
Yep. So the question was, I'll repeat it, and thank you for asking it because I did mention part of this. So we're doing income over fee cost. Should you look at it on a fixed milk price basis or an actual milk price basis? And then do you component correct that, right? So what we do, and Jason, you can pitch in here if you want to add to whatever you say, because the odds are I'm going to just speak here, and that's all fine. So the reality is you ought to look at it. I think you ought to look at it both ways, and that's how we do it with the Dairy Profit Monitor. Because again, one gives you what reality is, right? The other one gives you, okay, based on changes of, even though we haven't fixed the feed cost side, it does give us a sense for, okay, what has my management or whatever at the farm level maybe trended us in the direction here of using fixed price. You definitely have to component correct it, okay? Because obviously, and we do component correct it. And I think, Jason, we're using $18 per hundredweight of energy, correct? What are we using now?
We actually use the component price.
Okay, the component, so it actually is component prices.
Butter fat price, protein price, and all the solids price, so automatically corrects.
Okay.
Actual component.
Yeah, 'cause you got the whole milk check data in there too, and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, so you got to component correct and things like that. Make sure that you're looking at, again, and that makes the most sense to do it if we're actually using component prices rather than normalizing and calling it 17 or 18 bucks a hundred or 16 bucks a hundred, 14 bucks a hundred. So, okay. And then we always strive, this question came up yesterday, we always strive also to use actual feed. Okay, when we're doing our comparison, when I did that comparison in the discussion group, we standardized the forage and homegrown feed cost because that just can vary dramatically depending on what everybody wants to put on it. So that was to do a comparison across a group. Within a farm, of course, you can do, you strive for getting as close as you can to what it actually is. But we have some recommendations there within the program about what you might do there. But we did, at least in that comparison, use actual purchase feed costs. When we did that, we let that ride because that can vary. We use actual invoices as much as possible at the farm level, what the farms actually pay. Right, Jason? DPM. Okay. All right. I'll be around for a little bit, but I'm going to hand it back to Kathy. So thanks.
Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you, Kathy. Interesting topics here in the dairy industry here as we continue to change over time here. And good to see some familiar faces in the group, but also in the room, but also some other people here. For those that do know me, informal is good. Ask questions as we go. We don't need to wait to the end as we go through here. And then, so this is a thing that Ashley Howlett, one of our other Pro Dairy staff, and I kind of put together looking at the labor side here. And as Tom said, the crop input feed cost is the largest expense on farms, but everybody knows what the second largest one is on just about most of our farms. It is the labor side, especially when we account for the family value, so the family cost too, along with higher labor. So when we start looking at labor efficiency, and this isn't a new number, this has been around a long, long time, but it's again with the challenge in the earnings becoming a more focus again. So, and we have, you got the handout so you have the information, but when we look at it here, we have cows per worker, the average is 47.14, the range is 63. There's a big range out on farms that comes to management, comes to capital, comes to planning, designing, those types of things. So we have a big range. And then we look at the milk sold per worker, the average is 1.22. The range is 1.9 million, from the lowest farms to the highest farms. That's a big range. Now there's positive correlation. If we get labor efficiency higher, we tend to make higher profits. It's not direct correlation. Lots of other things come into play, but it tends to be positive. So that's what we want to look at here. Whoops. So now this is a project Ashley and I worked on here back in 2016. But we had farms put all their labor hours into 54 different categories. Like how much hours did they spend feeding calves? How much hours did they spend in the shop? How much hours did they spend on parts runs? That was pretty interesting in one of the farms. Said, well, how do we equate when the mechanic wants to go to the shop and comes and asks to use my pickup because it has 4 doors so the whole crew can go with them. So now not only don't I have my truck, I don't have my 4 people either because they all do the parts run. But the key here is looking at the range of some of the different areas on the farms. So like the shop and maintenance, and you'll have this table in your paper. The shop and maintenance, we go from 286 cows per worker to 2,900 cows per worker. What time is being spent on shop and maintenance? Or if we look at the heifers, the pre-weaned heifers, so those are the calves on milk. It's heifers per hour in this case, but we go from 3 to 29. There's a big difference in how much hours is spent taking care of those animals. What can we potentially do different on our farm? So there you can look at where is all the labor going. Obviously, the mature herd is the biggest source of labor, biggest requirement of labor, so take care of the milking and dry cows. But then there's all these other areas where labor is being spent. When you kind of look at the chart, it's kind of interesting. Well, what's the next biggest one? Well, now all of a sudden we got the shop. Shop and maintenance. And then we get into the wet calves. 6% of the labor on the farm is take care of wet calves. What can be done differently? What changes can we do on the farm? I don't know what button I keep hitting here. So how do we improve labor efficiency? What can we start doing? And there's some different things in there. So first we can start with capital. Do we need to invest capital? And when we think about investing capital, does this necessarily mean we build a new barn? Not necessarily. Do we build a new trailer? Do we put a cart in the shop for certain things? Do we rearrange the return alley from the parlor? It might be little less capital investment, but it's still capital investment. So we certainly have that in the shorter term and the longer term. So the shorter term is things like, can I rearrange the return alley? Can I make a cart for tire changing in the shop? Can I do something for feeding the calves? All these smartphones now have stopwatches on them. How do we use them? All right, it took 51 minutes for the calf feeder to get the milk from the milk house to the calf barn. Can we do something different about that? Why did that take that long? Might need some capital investment, but that's a shorter term thing versus the longer term, significant capital, major changes, new barns, new milking systems, new equipment, whatever. So our focus is more on the short term, especially this year. Next area is, can we improve operating efficiency? With the labor we have on the farm, can we waste less steps? So this is interesting conversations out on farms now. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here. So the capital investment historical approach. Is this new? What have we been doing ever since the first burro showed up that could carry something? What have we been doing? Replacing labor hours with what? Capital of some manner, shape, form. So this isn't new. It just continues. What do we do next on my business? We're focusing on 2 areas. Can we decrease the number of hours required to do a job? Can we take it from 4 hours down to 3? Second one is, well, all right, I'm still going to work that same hour, but instead of getting X done, I can now do what? X plus. I get more done in that same hour. Now the key here, are we asking you or the employees to run faster in that hour? No. Run the same speed you were running before, but by investing this capital, we're allowing you to do what? Accomplish a little bit more. And there's very good examples of that. Starting to be around the state here a little while, but one farm that I've known for a long, long time, 25 years ago, his 3 equipment operators were driving tractors pulling self-unloading wagons. And in the field, they would unhook them from the tractor and hook them up to the chopper. They'd fill them up and then do what? Unhook them from the chopper and the tractor, pull them to the field. Today, those 3 equipment operators are driving semis with automatics, pulling 40-foot self-unloading boxes that haul 30-some tons. Same 3 employees. How many tons do they harvest? haul in an hour now versus where they were 25 years ago. Huge difference in capital investment, huge difference in scale of the business. But there's an example of, okay, they're still driving the same number of hours, they're still driving a piece of equipment, but the equipment's what? Bigger, more efficient, changed. So for a stable herd size, how do I decrease hours? If I'm expanding herd, then it becomes, how do I get those hours to do more without necessarily running faster, running harder, taking more steps? Capital investment can positively impact other parts of the business besides just the labor, so output, other cost efficiencies. But as always, as soon as we invest capital, there are costs that do what? Go up. So where's our depreciation, our interest, our repairs, our taxes, our insurance? All those fixed costs associated. We have to take those into account, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to invest the capital. We're still better off doing what? Investing the labor, because it's not cost effective enough. Project here is looking at feed stuff. Large costs associated with feeding cows is the labor, the feeder, the person driving the equipment. And it's like, well, okay, farms that are feeding their cows for less. This has nothing to do with the cost of the feed. This is the cost to load it, mix it, and actually deliver it. And if we look at this chart here, this is mixer capacity. How well is the capacity full every time it leaves the bunk or leaves the feed center? So these farms here, way off to the left, are real high costs because the mixers aren't being utilized well. That driver driving that tractor, his cost is the same whether that mixer's full or 40% capacity. Because he still has to do what? Or she still has to do what? Drive it. So if we can run that mixer at 80% capacity all the time, that cost all of a sudden did what? Came down per unit per ton. And then similar thing, how well do we use that investment? Use that capital. If we can utilize that capital, we can lower our costs. Better utilize the assets, the labor that's doing the job. Again, if there's any questions, we don't have to wait till the end. You can feel free to ask as we go. Lean manufacturing, the lean process. So when we talk about improving the operational efficiency, this is where we think there's real opportunity. We're starting to spend more time. We're having more conversations on farms about this. What are we trying to do? Spend less hours getting the same job done, if not a better job done. Without us running harder, without us running faster, without us working more hours. So we start asking questions. How long does the activity take? 51 minutes to get the milk to the calf farm. Good question. What are the protocols, standard operating procedures for that activity? Are there any? Do we know how it's supposed to be done? Do we actually think about it in terms of how much labor hours? Are they actually being followed? Or it's like, well, there's three brothers doing the job, and they each decide how they want to do it. So if one brother does it, they do it this way, the other brother does it a different way, the third brother does it a different way. What's that mean for the efficiency, the operational efficiency of the business? And there's like 5 F's. And there's letters for it: sort, standardize, shine, sweep, sustain, keep doing it all the time, set. So we can spend more time on these things, but it might be a little bit better with kind of an example. What this really means. And a fun question to think about on your business, within your business, is the last 5-minute job you had to deal with that should have been only 5 minutes, how long did it take? Did it take 5 minutes, or did it take 10 minutes, or did it take an hour? So an example I like to use or come across is, all right, we broke a chain on a gate out in the freestall barn. So now we have to do what? Find a new chain. Well, all right, we go to the barn where the chains are supposed to be hanging, and there's what's not there. No chains. So now we go to the shop, because at the shop is where we need to make more chains. Well, what's not at the shop? There's no chain, there's no latches. Somebody took the torches, didn't return them, and the welder is out of wire. So now we got to do a parts run. And all the while, the gate's still open, and the cows are doing what? And where you kind of like, okay, that's a 5-minute job. Because we didn't have things organized, things weren't put back away, that 5-minute job now took an hour and a half, disrupted lots of other activities or people. What's that mean on my farm? How much hours of time gets wasted in those types of activities? How do we start minimizing those? Looking for tools, trying to find supplies, finding the tools that we need to do. We need to do vaccinations. Where's the supplies? Where's the animals? How do we minimize those steps? All those types of things. Lots of examples of that. And you start thinking about it in your own business. Okay, but the delivery truck brings deliveries to here. The payloader is stored where? Parked where? Over here. The pallet forks are parked where? In the third spot. Every time that delivery made, it took 22 minutes to get the payloader, get to where the forks were, put the forks on, get to the truck, unload the truck, put the forks back, put the loader back. What could we do differently in that circumstance? Any thoughts? Well, why don't we put the pallet forks where the delivery truck comes? So now we at least, when we go get the loader, we don't have to go where? One spot. Or if we had that many deliveries, maybe we get what? A used forklift that stays where? Where the deliveries come. And maybe that's even more efficient. So what can we do differently on our farms impact that labor side, on that lean part? So understanding tasks within the task. Where's the milk replacer stored? Where's the mixing room? Where's the mixing equipment? How many steps does it take to get everything assembled? Can we decrease those steps? We're not asking you to run faster, we're asking you to run less steps and get the job done. So the task within the task. What's the actual task versus the prep time or the cleanup time? Can we change those, impact those? Again, what changes can we make? Just by where we put stuff. Talk about the shop cart. What farms don't ever have to change tires? We change tires all the time. Well, okay, the jacks are stored here, the blocks are here, the air tools are here, the air hose is over there. We bring the truck in, the tractor in to change the tire. Now we got a trip to get the blocks, a trip to get the jacks, a trip to get the air tools or the sockets or the breaker bars or whatever, and then we gotta go get the air hose off the reel. Well, or do we build a tire changing cart? All the blocks, all the jacks, all the tools are stored where? All the time. On that cart. And when we bring the tractor in to change it, now the mechanic, the shop person only has to do one trip, and that's to do what? Go get the cart and bring the cart back. Then everything's right there. Now, if they don't put anything back on the cart, then what do we have? Problems. But did we just change shop efficiency by doing that? So a fun question to ask on your farm, and also the people actually doing the work, ask them. If you could make one change to make your life easier, what would it be? Within reason. I was like, boy, if we could store this here, or if we could have something for this, or if we could have something for this, can that make it easier for us to get our job done? And that's nice to ask that question because we can also bring them into the decision-making process. And that leads us to the labor effectiveness side. So it's not just how much work they're getting done, it's how much stuff do we waste, how much materials do we lose. Some of you already know this because you hear me talk about it enough times, but everybody know the 30-second AIS rule for equipment? If more than 30 seconds, your A, you can figure it out, isn't in the C, that piece of equipment better be what? Shut off. Because if you leave it idling, what is it doing? Burning fuel. We're burning diesel fuel. We're burning dollars for what purpose? None that I can figure out. Now, during the winter when it's 20 below, maybe you let it run the first hour so it's full and warm before you shut it off for 15 minutes. So we need to have that conversation. But it's like, all right, what about that fuel? So any of you that fly and travel in an airplane, when do they start those jet engines? at the last possible moment. Because they don't want them doing what? Running for no purpose. So just an example there of labor effectiveness. It's like, okay, we didn't leave it running just because. So now we start talking about that quality of work being done. Are we breaking things? All right, repairs, another big expense on farms. There's two ways to lower repairs. One is figure out a cheaper way to fix it. What's the more important way? Not break it. So how do we figure that out? You want to have fun and teamwork on your farm, you start coding repairs in your freestall barns and your equipment. You code them 3 things. First code, operator error. Some people make a 1A, 1B. 1 is hired, B is it's the owner, because if the owner broke it, then what do you do about that? So operator error number 1. 2 is poor maintenance. We greased it. Yes, next time put grease in the grease gun. It might work a little better. Third one was worn out. The plow points are just worn out. But that's another interesting one. We go to replace the chisel points, but not only do we have to replace the chisel point, we have to replace the shank because we did what? We waited too long to replace the chisel point and we wore out the shank. Well, now that's poor maintenance. So that quality work, training. What are we doing for training? Developing the people doing the work on the farm. We'll get the question, well, if we train them, they're going to leave. Well, if you don't train them and they stay, what does that mean? So what's our training? How do they get better? How can they be successful doing their jobs, whatever their jobs may be? So having that conversation. And then their visions, the goals, whether it's group or individual. Help build that labor effectiveness. And then implementing changes, because all this stuff is change. We start doing some of these lean manufacturing, lean process things. We invest capital. It all leads to change. So, all right, how do we foster acceptance and embrace of change? On some dairy farms across New York State, how fast do they like to change? I'm still waiting to see them actually change so I can actually measure it. That's how much they resist change. And it's like, well, okay, how can we embrace change, accept change, be excited about change? So things start coming in is the respect. Respect between managers, the owners, and the employees. What's that respect really look like? Employee comes to you with an idea. If you automatically say no, what's that employee going to think the next time they want to bring a suggestion to you? Now, no might be the right answer. But did we take any time explaining why or analyzing it or saying, well, keep bringing us thoughts, keep bringing us suggestions. Has anybody heard of Raymond Manufacturing in this room here? Located in Green, New York. Anybody know where Green, New York is? Well, it's one of the largest forklift manufacturers in the country, and it's in Green, New York. Like 1,400 employees on the shop floor building forklifts. What's interesting there is that, okay, if an employee does not make a suggestion on how to improve their aspect of their job on the shop floor within 6 months, the managers are going to that employee and asking what? Are you happy? Do you like it here? You're not making any suggestions. You're not trying to think how we can get better. What's going on? Because we expect you to do what? Give us suggestions for improvement. So I thought that was interesting. Including employees on decision making, especially if it impacts their area. Do they have input? What's that look like? What's that mean? Summary here. And again, questions here. This is work. This is management. Management is work. Does management burn calories? Not too much, regrettably. But it is work. You get tired. It uses up energy. We always have room to improve labor efficiency, labor effectiveness. The current environment's giving us more pressure to figure out how to do things. Where's our labor effectiveness, our training, the team, the culture? How do we start incorporating lean process concepts into our businesses? It's amazing what dairies do on quality of product, quality of job being done. Now the question becomes, can we have that same and not even better quality, less steps taken, less wasted steps, less back and forth. And then the capital investment. Boy, as I analyze things, I track these things, I look at things. Do I need to invest a little money here, a little money here? Do I need that tire change and carton shop? Does that give me a big return? Boy, do I put an automatic feed pusher up into my farm. Because that frees up enough labor so we don't have to push the feed up. Those types of questions. That takes care of us here. Questions? There we go.
All right, so I have a question, Jason. So this lean, implementing this lean practice on the farm, to me, when you talk about it, it almost seems like overwhelming. There's so much on the farm that it could apply to. So you gave sort of an indication of the way to go about it. Could you just kind of expand on that a little bit? About your farm, you want to implement this. Where do you start?
Yeah, so first we start small. We don't try to do it everywhere. We pick one area. And the first part is assessing, watching, timing. What is actually occurring? And the challenge is not having it be perceived as negative. That's not the job. That's not our goal. If we're watching what's occurring, that 51 minutes to get the milk to the thing. Okay, why did it take 51 minutes? Do we need to change something? Do we need to improve something? The employee's doing their best effort. It's not the employee's fault. But can we do something different, give that employee different tools, change the process, change locations? Then we start asking that question, and then it says, okay, now what are we going to do? And if we do that, what's the new training that needs to be done? So they know how to do it. And then, okay, then if we switch to that, is everything put back to where it needs to be? How much time do we spend trying to find something that we need to do our job? Because it wasn't where it was supposed to be. So large farm is very interesting. They have 13 payloaders. One employee hides his payloader so nobody can use it on him. Another employee went and bought a master key that allows him to start any of the 13 payloaders so he could use whatever one he wanted. Because the big challenge on this farm was there's employees standing around not doing their jobs because the payloader wasn't available that they needed to do their job. The issue wasn't that they didn't have enough payloaders. The issue was all the work that needed payloaders were scheduled when? At the same time. It's like, how do we change the workflow so the payloaders are available when they're needed? So that's kind of where we start. How long did something, so when we start, boy, it just took, that 5-minute job just took an hour. How come? We write it down, we assess it. Then, all right, what do we want to do different? What do we need to put in place? So I go back to Raymond Manufacturing. Again, very interesting, and that's not just Raymond, other manufacturing companies, other organizations, Chick-fil-A franchises. So when an employee needs a supplier or tool to do a job, how long does it take them to find that tool or supply? Their standard is 1 second. That the employee knows where it is, and when they go there, it's what? There, and it might be oriented in the right direction, or it might be positioned in the right way. So like a wrench, if we need the open-end wrench and it needs to be tilted in the right direction, the wrench is stored in which manner? In that manner, so when I grab the wrench, it's automatically in which orientation, the way I need it. So that's where we try to start, but we just pick one area. Once we get that area fixed or addressed, then we do what? Move on to the next one.
Great. Anything else for Jason? All right, then please join me in thanking Jason.